It's cold and wet, and with no warning, a soft whoosh above your head. Seconds later, bombs ring out of the darkness. You never see the plane, and you'll never hear it leave. Hey everyone, welcome back, and if you're new, then welcome in. I just want to say, first off, thank you for watching, and second off, what's that behind you? Nah, I'm just kidding. Or am I? I'm very happy to show you guys this video. Like every video, this was pretty hard to make, and I hope it shows, but you must be curious where those bombs suddenly came from, right? We'll go over that, I promise. But like the last video, here's a layout of the chapters that we're going to cover. This video will comprise of 5 chapters, and there will be timestamps if you want to skip to a part that catches your attention. But with that covered, I think it's time to talk about the Night Witches and how they traumatized the Nazis. Chapter 1. Where did they come from? You and that German soldier may be asking the same question. Where did they come from? Well, the Night Witches were formed in 1941 after Germany invaded the Soviet Union by Marina Roskava, and with the permission of the Soviet leader, Joseph Stalin. She formed 2 other aviation regiments, the 586th and the 587th Regiment. But the 588th was very unique because it was made up of entirely females, pilots, navigators, mechanics, and ground crews. And I think this might have played a role in messing up the heads of German soldiers, but we'll talk about that later. Most of them were teenagers or in their early 20s, youngest being 17 years old. The pilots were students who had just gotten the ropes of flying planes a few weeks earlier, and most had the experience of civilians. Yes, like us. They were seen as underdogs and even taunted and made fun of by other regiments, but I don't think that was the biggest insult they dealt with. Chapter 2. The Crop Duster. Before we talk more about the Night Witches, we have to talk about the plane they flew. And let's just say it wasn't the best. You see, they flew a Polikarpov PO2, and I think to make things easier, we'll just go with the PO2 for the rest of the video. The PO2 was designed by Soviet aircraft designer Nikolai Polikarpov. It was first flown in 1927, and it was mostly used as a training plane due to how easy it was to fly. But talking about the PO2, it was only renamed after Nikolai's death in 1944. This plane was also nicknamed the Crop Duster. It got this name because it was literally used for dusting crops. You see, before it saw time in the war, it was used to spray pesticides and fertilizers over farmers' fields. It was built using a wooden frame, and it was slow but stable, which made it very easy to fly very low without the plane stalling. Again, great for spraying pesticides, but as we'll see later, this was also very effective for some quieter actions. Since the PO2 has such a low speed and also no armor or radio, it meant that it was a very easy target in the day for German planes. Another problem with the PO2 was the cockpit. It was small and very cramped. What does this mean? Well, it meant that you couldn't exactly wear a parachute. You know, the thing you use to get you out of a sticky situation. This means that if you were to fly up in a PO2, then you'd either come back or you'd go down with the plane. So after some thinking, it was put into a different role. Okay, I know, I just dogged on the plane, but maybe it was a genius move seeing it now. You see, since it had such a low speed, it also meant it couldn't be picked up on the Germans' radar. And it meant that it was very maneuverable. And if you cut the engine, well, you were damn near invisible in the night. And so I ask you this, how do you think this aircraft turned into a German soldier's worst nightmare? Chapter 3. Fighting Spirit. Now that we know what they flew, let's talk about how they fought. Because this is where things just stop being interesting and start becoming absolutely terrifying. You see, the Night Witches didn't rely on speed nor firepower. They relied on coordination, timing, and pure nerve. You see, their attacks followed a simple but very devastating plan. We'll just say it's a 3-phase plan. See, first they'd send decoys. 2 PO2s would approach the target area with their engines running really loud and clear, not trying to hide, not trying to be subtle. They really wanted to be seen. German soldiers would hear the engine and immediately look up, searchlights snapped on, anti-aircraft guns opened fire, tracers ripped through the sky as everyone focused on the noise. As everybody's eyes were up, well, at that point, it was a done deal. Because while the decoys drew attention, the third plane was already moving in. But this time they were flying lower, slower, and closer. And then in an instant, the engine was cut. Just like that. No roar, no hum, no warning. The PO2 turned from a plane into a glider. I really want you guys to picture what that felt like on the ground. 1 second, the night is loud with, gunfires and engines, and the next, silence. Not peaceful silence, the kind that makes your stomach drop just from the uneasiness of the silence. The plane slipped through the darkness, almost invisible against the black sky. No radar detection, no engine heat, just a plane drifting. Then, like we mentioned before, came a sound. And not the engine, a soft whoosh. This is where German soldiers later said that it sounded like a broom sweeping through the night. That sound alone was enough to freeze people in their place, because by the time you heard it, it was already too late. The bombs were dropped from incredibly low altitudes. Explosions tore through camps, supply lines, fuel depots. Fire lit up in the darkness, revealing confusion. Searchlights would swing violently, trying to find something, anything just to shoot at, but there was nothing there. And just as the chaos peaked, the decoy planes returned, engines roaring again as the third aircraft disappeared into the darkness. And with that, it was a mission complete. And night after night, the same pattern repeated. German soldiers stopped lighting cigarettes. Some even refused to sleep. Others swore they heard the whispering sound, even when no planes came. They gave the pilots a name. And as you know it now, the Night Witches. Chapter 4. The Cost of Every Mission. Okay, by now I think I hammered home that flying with the Night Witches was never about a single mission, because each plane carried only a few bombs, just enough to do damage, but never enough to really finish the job. And so they landed, reloaded, and flew again, and again, and again. For the Witches, 8 missions in a single night? That wasn't impressive. That was normal. Some nights, pilots flew 10, 12, some flew 18 missions right before dawn. No rest, no real breaks, just a quick refuel, a reload, and back into the darkness you go. And night wasn't just dangerous, it was absolutely brutal. The PO2 had an open cockpit, no insulation, no protection from the wind. At altitude, temperatures dropping far below freezing. The air cut their faces, their hands went numb on the controls. Ice formed on their goggles and eyelashes. See, frostbite wasn't rare, it was expected. Some pilots had to be physically helped out of the cockpit after landing, fingers stiff, faces pale, unable to feel their feet. And after warming up just enough, you guessed it, they went back. The danger wasn't theoretical. If a PO2 was hit, there was usually no escape. No armor, no absorbed damage, no radio, no parachute. If something went wrong, it ended quickly. Over the course of the war, 33 women from the regiment would sadly lose their lives. Some were shot down, some crashed in darkness or bad weather, some never even made it back from a mission. And each loss was felt immediately. These weren't anonymous pilots, rotated in and out. They flew together, they slept near each other, they shared fear, exhaustion, and cold. And then one night, someone didn't return. There was no time to grieve properly, because the missions didn't stop. And this was the part that's hardest to understand. After everything we mentioned, the cold, exhaustion, and losses, they kept flying. They didn't measure success by survival alone. They measured it by persistence, by showing up again. Every mission cost something: warmth, strength, sleep, sometimes a life. But they paid that price over and over until the war finally ended. Chapter 5. Their Legacy. When the war was finally over, the Night Witches didn't disappear into just a myth. They disappeared into a legacy. Over the course of the war, the regiment flew more than 23,000 combat missions. Not just paroles, combat missions. They dropped over 3,000 tons of bombs on enemy positions, rail yards, supply lines, and 23 women from that regiment were rewarded the highest honor in the Soviet Union, Hero of the Soviet Union. On paper, that should guarantee their place in history, right? But history doesn't always remember fairly. When the guns went silent, the world didn't rush to tell the story. Instead, the Cold War began. And as tensions rose between East and West, Soviet stories became inconvenient. Western narratives of World War II narrowed their focus. D-Day, Normandy, anything tied too closely to the Soviet Union was minimized, questioned, or quietly ignored. The Night Witches didn't fit the story the West wanted to tell, so they simply left it out. And when were they mentioned? They were often reframed, not as elite combat pilots, not as veterans of psychological warfare, but as a curiosity. Female pilots, women flyers, their danger was downplayed. Their success was treated like an exemption, not earned, but accidental. As if the war had simply happened to them, as if flying 18 missions in one night was a novelty act. World War II became a story told through familiar images. Heavy bombers, fighter aces, massive formations in daylight skies. A slow wooden biplane flown at night by women didn't match the image. Not because it wasn't important, but because it didn't look like what people expected heroism to look like. But legacy isn't decided by those who talk the loudest. It's decided by impact. They turned outdated planes into weapons, weakness into a strategy, and fear into control. And with that, they rewrote the rules of combat. And they did it while flying without armor, without radios, and without parachutes, and always knowing that every mission could be their last. Today, their story's slow but reclaimed, not as a gimmick, not as a footnote, but what it truly was. One of the most effective and psychologically devastating air campaigns of the war. They didn't just fight the enemy, they changed how the enemy felt. They took sleep, they took certainty, they took peace from the night itself. And when history tried to erase them, they endured, just like they always had. Because the Night Witches never meant to be loud. They were meant to be remembered, if so quietly. Just like the sound of the whoosh in the dark, after the engines were cut. So that's going to do it for the video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed, but most importantly, I really hope you guys learned something new. Researching it was a lot of fun, and trying to collect everything. I just want to talk about this to shine the light on some things that maybe people have forgotten about. And so with that, I just want to say thank you so much for watching, and I plan to start another channel because I want to dive more into the gaming world. I'm currently going live on TikTok every once in a while. So if that sounds interesting, tune in there because there's a lot of fun things that are happening inside there. We are playing games, and yeah, you can always find my TikTok in the channel description. But if you like this video, consider looking at the first video of the Latin cryptic iceberg, or look into the scary future of all tomorrows, which I also did cover. So with that, as always, I love y'all. Stay safe. Bye bye.